Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. We'll just let a few more people filter in as we get started. My name's Michael Richardson. I'm visiting here from the lands of the Kaurna people on what we now know as the Adelaide Plains. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Gumaniapa Nation, and recognise their continuing connection to this land, its waters, and to their culture. I pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging. I also extend those respects to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Now, I'm a town planner. I'm sorry for that, and we often get blamed for everything. And circular economy is a significant part of my company's business, but we work across numerous sectors, including a lot of work in medium and higher density residential and mixed-use development. So it's really good to be able to be here for this session. Higher density living is often seen, particularly when the media talks about it, very negatively. Terms like dog boxes and issues such as poor design, structural failures and poor management making their way into the media. That being said, done well, higher density living is a path to many really good outcomes, including reducing inequality, promoting affordability, reduced resource consumption, improved accessibility, and reduced carbon emissions through the whole life cycle of buildings. All of this, however, is predicated on good design, and you only get one chance at good design. When you assess buildings at the start, that's a once off. Operations, adaptive reuse and refurbishment, together with education, all have to be part of the mix. So anyway, let's find out how. We've got 5 excellent speakers. I'm sure everyone's had a look at the details and their abstracts. Rachael Roberts is the Circular Economy Manager at the City of Melbourne. Her paper's entitled Taking Food and Organic Collection Service to New Heights. Rachael, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. So today I'll be presenting on a pilot project City of Melbourne have been embarking on since December last year. So we're almost at the 6-month midpoint of the pilot program. So I'm here to present our learnings and our findings and what we've done. So to give you a bit of a background about City of Melbourne's FOGO rollout, we've successfully introduced it to single unit dwellings in our municipality as well as mid-rise MUDs. So mid-rise are anything 5 stories and below. We have about 23,000 households being serviced by our FOGO recycling service. And the last stage is to tackle the high-rise MUDs, which are particularly complex. We have a few competing factors at City of Melbourne, so we're trying to introduce more services, food recycling being one of them, but we would also like at the same time to reduce truck movements within our city, and we would also like to be able to store that food waste for longer to allow for less truck movements. So this is a bit of a map of our LGA. We've obviously got quite a lot of residents. We have about 170,000 residents living within our municipality. We also have quite a few transient residents, so we have a lot of students, particularly in the CBD and North Melbourne, and we have quite a few tourists as well. So we have a lot of visitors that love to come to our wonderful city, but that does make diverting food waste quite complex. So what are the drivers for us to introduce FOGO? So under the Recycling Victoria policy, we must introduce FOGO as a service to all Victorian households by 2030. But also beyond that, we also at City of Melbourne have a target to divert 90% of waste from landfill by 2030. So we've got 2 strong strategic and policy drivers there. Again, we believe that for safety and amenity reasons. We would like to reduce truck movements. We've got a lot of private contractors that service apartment buildings in the city. It can be quite noisy, and residents don't particularly love the amount of truck movements at the moment. So how did we tackle this? Well, we rolled out dehydrators in 6 high-rise buildings across Melbourne. We identified these buildings through an EOI process, so the owners' corporations put in an EOI, they were interested in a new technology, their residents wanted to divert and recycle their food waste, and we scoped out their buildings and their bin rooms to see if these units would fit. We procured from 2 suppliers on a lease basis, so we've got 12-month leases with Eco Guardians and Enrich 360. Their equipment offerings are a little bit different. The one on the left is the Eco Guardians one. It's a bit bulkier, and the mechanics are a little bit different. And the one on the right is an Enrich 360 machine, which is a bit smaller, easy to fit in smaller bin rooms, and yeah, just a little bit different. We're trialling both just to see which ones work and yeah, see if it's a model for all our high-rise buildings moving forward. So what do? They're pretty simple. Residents insert their food waste into the machine. They actually swipe their fob or are issued a key card depending on the supplier. So we can track their food waste by apartment dwelling, which is particularly useful for waste planners to determine how much food waste is being generated, because at the moment that generation rate really differs from council to council. So the food waste is collected in the unit, then every night from about 10 p.m. to about 5 a.m, the machine starts heating and essentially cutting down the food waste. What we get at the end is a nice dehydrated product. So the water is ejected through the sewer system and we're left with this nice dehydrated product. The dehydrated product is great because it reduces the volume by 80%, so it's a lot easier to store. It also smells a lot less. What comes out of the machines, it's sort of akin to Christmas pudding, and I know it sounds like real marketing speak, but it actually does smell like Christmas pudding, so it's quite delightful. It's discharged, so it's collected in these tubs. Because there's no water content, you can actually store it for a while before it needs to be collected, so it reduces the volume, it can be stored in the bin room. At the moment we have 2 arrangements, so with Eco Guardians they actually self-collect and they're building their own plant for soil blending in the north of Victoria, which is really exciting because then they can sort of provide the technology but also blend it with soil and on-sell it. But with the Enrich 360, Remondis comes and collects those. So this is a bit of a map of where we've located the dehydrators. So as you can see, they're scattered, but mostly around the CBD because that's where the concentration of high-rise buildings are. So costs. So there's a lot of costs that go into this pilot program, and it is quite costly to run, and hopefully economies of scale be realised once we scale up or look at ways to become a bit more efficient. So first and foremost, we've got the equipment lease. So because we've only leased these pieces of equipment for 12 months, we are paying a bit of a premium on the lease. Typically, commercial premises will lease them for about 5 years. That reduces that year-on-year lease cost. The caddies and the liners, so we distribute caddies for the use for residents to collect their food waste, and also liners we distribute twice annually. We do ask that residents only use our liners because there is a bit of a mix-up when they're not issued the appropriate liners. We did also have to fit out a few of the buildings. So the pieces of equipment we're using use 3-phase power and also require dedicated plumbing. So we did have to fit out a few of those buildings, but the costs were sub $1,000, so it wasn't too much to kind of bring them up to scratch. Signage, so with everything we needed education, and that included the buildings with the chutes. We had to put signage on each of the floors to make sure that people walked all the way down and put their food waste in the unit. It's always a struggle to get people to go down to a bin room when there's one big chute that can catch everything. So we deliberately selected a bunch of buildings with chutes and some buildings with no chutes and some buildings with diverter chutes, just to see, is the behaviour different? And because we get that resident by resident data of who's using it in the building, we can really compare to say, is a chute building appropriate for something like this, or, does everything just go through the one chute on each floor? Electricity costs, so because it's obviously plugged in and does that cycle every night, there's a bit of electricity that goes into it, but it averages about $6 a day, so it's quite reasonable. Discharge and cleaning, that's actually quite a significant cost, so we've got other contractors that come in every morning and discharge the unit and will ensure that it's wiped down. There's a lot of sensors on the equipment, so what we find is if food gets caked onto the hatch, it won't close properly and then the cycle won't run, so it does need to be relatively clean. And data management, so we've got dashboards that are live, so we can see it from City of Melbourne HQ, how much food's going in, we can see if there's an error, what the error is, and we can rectify the issue, but there is a charge to access that dashboard. A lot of key stakeholders in this, and it was one of the lagging factors. Owners, corporations don't move fast, and supply chains are really challenging at the moment, so when trying to procure equipment and install it, it did take a bit longer than we originally anticipated. We've also obviously got residents, so they're a key stakeholder and a champion for this program. They're also the ones that, I guess, interact with the machine directly, so we really need them to be engaged. One of the key learnings is because this is a bit different to your standard bin and there are, several steps involved and there's ins and outs in terms of what you can and can't put into the machine, we did need to run quite a few induction sessions. To become a bit more efficient, we've created online induction sessions because doing them one-on-one's, next to impossible with resourcing. End users and composters, so at the moment the output's actually being blended with compost at a composting facility in Victoria. However, we're looking at opportunities to vertically integrate. So Eco Guardians, as I said, are building their own plant that will blend directly with soil. So we've got quite a few dwellings that fall under the high-rise category. We've also got quite a lot of student accommodation. We have installed one unit at a uni lodge in Melbourne as well, and that's actually run by the building itself, so we don't require that discharge service because they self-operate that, which is really good. So we did really want a nice mix of buildings. Interestingly, that classification of 5 stories and above can represent quite a range of dwellings. So we've got one building that has about 73 dwellings, and then we've got, I guess, a building with 300 dwellings, and we're just trying to find that Goldilocks spot because it's less about height and more about number of dwellings when it comes to economies of scale. How's the pilot tracking? You might have seen a while ago, ABC News did a lovely feature on our program, and there's our wonderful Lord Mayor standing in front of the machine. It's not often you get a media team in a bin room. So we're quite happy about that, and also got a lot of interest. We have baselined the food content of our general waste bin prior to the start of this pilot, and what we found across the buildings there was about 37 to 48% of FOGO in our general waste, so it's quite substantial. If we're able to divert all of it or most of it, fantastic. At the moment, we're getting about half of that 48% going through the machine. Several reasons for that. Not everything can go in this piece of equipment, so things like large bones, shells from oysters, anything that a blade essentially would struggle to cut through is out of scope, so that still needs to go into their general waste. So far so good. We are seeing far less contamination. So across City of Melbourne, we hover around the 12% mark across our other dwellings. I think because we've got quite a level of engagement, interactivity, and we can also see who's using the machine, we are getting less than 2%. And that contamination generally is quite innocuous, so it's someone using the wrong bag rather than the compostable liners and those sorts of things, so we can catch that quite early on. So yeah, as I said, we do have a range of buildings. So Curzon Street being quite a low dwelling building, and obviously the cost per dwelling for this pilot is quite high. Early indication, I suspect that buildings around the 150 to 300 dwelling mark makes sense for this model, but anything less than that, it does become quite costly. There is also ongoing supply chain issues, so rolling this out further, we would have to plan well in advance, and we'd also have to select almost bespoke pieces of equipment to suit each of the bin rooms. Our bin rooms are very old. Some buildings were made before bins even existed around Melbourne, so it is a challenge trying to squeeze a big piece of kit that requires power into a small building. So this is our baseline audits. So we engaged SALT3 to do the audits of the general waste. On the right-hand side, you can see the total food waste, but then also the orange bar is essentially what is in scope for acceptance in the machine. So as you can see, most of the food waste can go in the equipment. There's only a minor percentage that's out of scope and would cause damage. But again, that's another educational hurdle. So we address that through inductions. We place stickers on our caddies to say, don't put crab shells on there. So people get it. We did find there was a huge issue with corn. So corn cobs can't go into the equipment either. They're too hardy to be broken down. And for some reason, one building consumes a lot of corn and we can't figure out why. But yeah, that's easy to message. If it's just one contaminant, then you just say no corn. So that building has a lot of signs that say no corn. Yeah, a little bit of challenge, I guess. So the EPA Victoria doesn't classify the output as compost because it is not technically composted. So it does need to go through a second process. We haven't yet tested the output, so we want to get a bit of a nutrient profile by testing the outputs of each of the buildings. Interestingly, depending on the socioeconomic and the demographic of each building, you do get a bit of a different output. I find Unilodge, it's a lot of KFC, it's quite oily. SV did some research a year ago that suggests that if you sort of take a sample or take the outputs of buildings and blend it as a whole, it all kind of balances out. So if you have a building that's eating quite well and eating lots of fruits and vegetables, and another building that's living on pizza, the nutrient profile does even out. But that's sort of ongoing research that we're looking at, and whether we can sort of skip the blending with a windrow or in tunnel compost and go straight to soil blending. It's suggested that it's a 1:20 ratio as well, so you don't want to put it direct on land. It's far too nutrient rich. It will actually shock your plants, and that's not what we want. So a soil blend of 1 part dehydrated output and 20 parts soil tends to be the sweet spot. So some lessons learned. I like to present things warts and all, and it hasn't been easy. So onboarding residents, it's really hard. Residents don't have much time to attend bin room meetings. Asking residents to spend their Saturday morning staying around their bin room learning about food waste, it's a hard carrot. It does take time to perform its cycle, so it's not a 24/7 available service. So we typically timed our cycles to be overnight, but again, if you have a whole cohort of residents that are shift work or, work night shift, then they might not have access when everyone else does, so that we might not capture that material. So we're looking at, I guess, opportunities for an overflow bin that can then go in when the machine's ready to take input again. Space, that was the hardest thing with procurement. So we basically had to audit every bin room to make sure that the machine could actually be put in there. We've got small roller doors on some of our bin rooms and could fit and could essentially be connected to power. Accessibility, so not everyone can reach as high. So, there is a bit of opening a hatch door, putting the material in. So those with mobility issues might struggle. We're getting some accessibility consulting work done just to make sure that it is mostly accessible to all of our residents. And discharging and cleaning, it's a large cost of this pilot. So it's about 50% we're spending at the moment on the discharge and cleaning service. That's probably over-engineering it a bit because we're worried that it would cause a lot of spillage and, you know, residents wouldn't be happy with it. So we're looking to kind of take that back and lower that cost quite substantially or even eliminate it completely. So the good things about the pilot is we get really great data. We get really granular data. We know who's using it, when they're using it, how much they're using it, and how much food waste they're generating, which is really good for when we're approving future buildings. Again, being able to lower contamination because, you know, we've got that sort of one-on-one with the residents and we can easily pick up that contamination during the discharge. So each discharge is photographed and we can go, okay, well, these are the things that shouldn't be in there. So it's really interactive and it's a closed loop. Being able to sample products. So given seasonality as well, we'll be looking to do a lot of sampling across the year just to make sure that the nutrient profile is relatively consistent and good for use. And yeah, again, like understanding occupancy rates. So we've got a bit of a blind spot and we don't know how many apartment dwellings are Airbnbs, for example, and we pretty much assume that the Airbnbs aren't utilising it, so we're not ever going to get 100% of residents, but we understand, you know, the transient nature as well because we're issuing out new key cards and those sorts of things to residents, so it's quite useful. And also being able to buy back batches of the products. So residents in our Spring Street building are issued little bags that they can use on their home gardens at the moment. So yeah, this is quite interesting because I'm cognizant that this almost needs to compete with your traditional FOGO model. And at the moment, the pilot ranges from about $35 per dwelling to $138 per dwelling per year. So quite a range, and that's because of the number of dwellings in the building. So Curzon Street's the most expensive per dwelling because it's got the smallest amount of dwellings. On the right-hand side is a bit of a breakdown of the costs. So as I said before, lease is quite substantial, but cleaning, you know, hovers around that 50% mark. So that is quite a substantial cost line that we're looking to eliminate. And if we were to eliminate that, then essentially it would halve that per dwelling cost as well, which would be awesome because that highly competes then with our traditional bin-based service. This is a bit of an example of the dashboard that we see. I quite like it because you get really good data, you understand what's going in, what's going out, and how much soil food is being produced, and that's just the patented name for the dehydrated material output. We also get good data on greenhouse gas emissions abated, so it's, you know, a really good, clear picture of what we're doing beyond just diversion in tonnes. And this is our Q1 results. We would have liked to have been a bit more progressed, but with supply chain issues, the equipment didn't get installed as soon as we would have liked. But as you can see, we've seen a sharp decline across our Spring Street and Curzon Street building in terms of the food waste present in their general waste. And that will continue to decline to a point as we're getting more and more residents onboarded and using the equipment. It's just a slow behaviour change that we're seeing. And that's it so far. And so we'll be concluding the pilot in February and then reviewing whether we want to scale it up across other buildings and also continue with our current buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. That was fascinating. What we're going to do, we're just going to save any questions. So if you do have any questions for Rachel, just hold on to those to make it easier for the people watching on the live stream. We'll get everyone back at the end and ask some questions. Next speaker is Narelle Bowley, Team Leader Resource Recovery and Major Projects Waste at the City of Canterbury, Bankstown. Her paper's entitled On Site, On Our Mind. Welcome, Narelle.
Thank you. Okay, today I'm going to talk about the balancing of urban design and efficient waste servicing. So Richard, you should like this one too. Okay, one of the tasks that my team does is undertake development assessments for waste servicing. So as part of any assessment, we consider how the waste service is to be provided and what waste infrastructure is required for the buildings. We also consider the residents' usage and their behaviour around the bins and the infrastructure as well. So as part of the DA, waste is one of many issues, and our waste requirements can often conflict with traffic, engineering, trees, landscaping, building design, and any other planning issue. If waste isn't considered up front in the design phase, then these conflicts get harder to resolve the longer the process goes for. Now at CB City, we've been trying to get some robust data and parameters around the waste infrastructure requirements to achieve a better design outcome for the buildings, but allow a greater ease of waste servicing as well. So before I get into the study, a bit about our city. We're located 23 kilometres southwest of Sydney CBD. We're the two former councils, Canterbury and Bankstown, which were merged in 2016. Our population in 2021 was over 370,000 people, and it's expected to reach close to 500,000 by 2036. Now, these people are housed in about 46% of the population is in MUDs currently, and that's expected to increase to about 60% by 2036. So this development growth is leading obviously to the higher density unit blocks, more mixed use, more dual occupancies, more boarding houses, which are now co-living, built to rent, and student housing as well with them. So you can see that we've gone from the small red brick, which might have 6 residents in them, to these lovely designed, very tall buildings with them. So we need about 500,000 more dwellings by 2036, and it's a constant balance to ensure that we have the necessary development but can continue to provide the economical and efficient waste service. And part of an efficient waste service is an efficient waste fleet. Now, council runs in-house collection for red and yellow bins. So a question that we ask ourselves, what does an efficient fleet look like, and how do we service this type of growth that's expected? So, I thought I'd fixed all those slidey bits, sorry. We began our quest for answers about 3.5 years ago with the writing of Council's Local Strategic Planning Statement, or the LSPS, and we called ours Connective City 2036. Now, the Greater Sydney Commission's plan, a metropolis of 3 cities, and for us, the South District plan, required Council to write this statement. Now, this statement was then to feed into the review of the LEP, and the DCP would flow through that way as well. So we entered into the strategic world by stating waste is an essential service. We put that in big bold letters and we got it in there with it. So this has then flowed through into our LEP, which is also waste is an essential service. So we then commenced incorporating best practice waste infrastructure and servicing into the DCP and developing waste guidelines to support it. However, for the moment, we're not using the consolidated DCP. We're still operating under 2 DCPs, one for Bankstown, one for Canterbury, and they've both got different objectives and different goals for them. So it makes quite a challenge when we're assessing development applications that come through, and neither is really up to best practice because they were done many years ago. So while we wait for our consolidated LEP to be approved by the Department of Planning, we have developed the master plans for Bankstown and Campsie, and that's where the majority of our growth will be. So it's through these master plans that we've continued to push for waste as an essential service and to have equal consideration for other planning matters. So discussions around on-site waste collection began with the parking, loading and servicing study undertaken. So in Canterbury Bankstown, we've got quite a lot of main roads that crisscross across our LGA where we can't legally stop on the road to collect any collect and return or curbside with them. So we are looking at on-site for particularly some of the larger ones. So the first initial rounds of study recommended that on-site should be for 30 units. Cool, 30 units. That sounds easy. Planners agreed to that one pretty quick. Yay! But we need to remember that for us, the majority of our fleet would be called heavy rigid vehicles. And so when we assess any development applications, we actually use the Australian standard for off-street commercial vehicle facilities that have for things like a height clearance of 4.5 and the length of 12.5 metres for the truck. So it's a substantial size vehicle that we wanted to be able to get on site. But what that meant for us then was that any development with 30 units and over would be able to have a HRV as per the Australian standards go on site for it. So we went, yay. We then mentioned this to the planners and told them, oh, that's going to be a 4.5 height clearance for you. They went, yeah, no, we're not doing that. That's not going to look any good. We don't like that. So at this point, it was then recognised we probably need a bit more study around to what that would actually look like in terms of an urban design outcome for it. But we still wanted to be able to provide a flexible and efficient and economic service to our residents, with a bit of future-proofing as well. So this led to the on-site collection and urban design. So this study was to develop service standards, development controls for on-site collection, and identify better outcomes for on-site collection as well. So Tallis Consulting were appointed, and then they sub-consulted to Benson McCormack for the architectural and design parts for it. So this study did a literature review, so we just wanted to find out what did everybody else do. The urban design and traffic analysis, so how do you have a good-looking building with a HRV access? And then waste data analysis to calculate the financial costs and carbon emissions for the different size vehicles that we were studying. So if we start with the third point, to ensure that we continue to provide an efficient service, financial modelling looked at the travel distance to disposal points, the vehicle purchase costs, and operating costs such as fuel, payloads and staff. Unsurprisingly, heavy rigid vehicles have the lowest per tonne cost to collect and transport all waste streams and can carry up to approximately 3 times as much waste as a small rigid vehicle, reinforcing their operational efficiency. More collection vehicles means the CO2 emissions would increase and more trucks would increase the cost of the domestic waste charge. Now, we have several suburbs that score well below the Greater Sydney and New South Wales average for socio-economic disadvantage. And so with the increased cost of living, we didn't want to put any further costs into our residents for more vehicles or other ways of doing it. So efficiency is really important for us. But it raised the question of what is an efficient service? And some of you might have been involved in the IPART review that was done last year, the year before, and the key thing for that was an efficient service. So we asked ourselves, what are the benefits of using a small rigid vehicle? Can we expect residents to pay for the additional need for small rigid vehicles? Is there benefits to residents or just the developer? Is a better designed building worth the additional cost of using small rigid vehicles? So we dived straight into those rabbit holes. So with Tallis and Benson and McCormack, we came up with some study outcomes for it. So we found that other services are also required. Waste isn't the only service required for a development. Substations, letterboxes, fire hydrants, and they can also affect the design outcomes of any building. Now, if all these were put in a straight line, and you can see here that the designers in our city like straight lines, 17 metres of the site frontage would be taken up with these services as well, including the driveway. Now, internal discussions with our planners said, no, only 30% of the site frontage can be taken up with any of these services with them. So having everything in a straight line would mean the lot front would need to be about 50 to 60 metres with them. And that might not really be the best design outcome to have everything in the front, let alone actually finding blocks that were 50 or 60 metres frontage with them. So we separated out the waste vehicle entrance and the driveways from the other services. And what we found was that the minimum lot size required for ground level waste collection for a HRV were 45 metres deep by 23 metres wide. And that does exclude the other services that we just saw. So these were calculated by the vehicle entering in a forward direction, doing one reverse movement and exiting in a forward direction as well for it. But if we take the dimensions from the previous slide, it was found that a frontage of 50 metres was required for all the services plus a HRV on site with it. But now we had our numbers, so we now knew what lot size we were looking for to be able to get HRV on site with it that would give us a reasonable design outcome with them. Now, if we wanted to look at basement collections, based on the Australian standards for a HRV, you need at least a 32-metre ramp with them. So therefore, the depth of your block is now something like 70 metres deep with them. And none of them were in our study areas that we could find that. But that was another major breakthrough that we had in the studies, that we've now got some numbers around lot sizes that a HRV can actually access on site with it. Now, as we progressed through the study, we had an internal workshop to discuss the inconsistencies with ground floor level heights between the Draft Apartment Design Guide of 2021, the Bankstown and Campsie Master Plan, and the Australian Standards for the Parking of Off-Street Commercial Vehicles. So the Draft Apartment Guide required a 3.7 floor-to-ceiling height. Our master plan said, nope, we want 4.4. And then we have the Australian standard for the vehicles saying 4.5 clearance. So there's numbers going everywhere in this workshop with it. But these small differences actually have huge design impacts to any development with them. Now, we had over 30 team members across our council attend this workshop with them. And at the end of the workshop, it was agreed that the master plan heights, floor-to-height ceilings of 4.4 would be kept, and that would allow some commercial better outcomes on ground floor, but we would also keep the 4.5 height clearance for trucks with them. So this led to staff having an agreement about on-site waste collection requiring the 4.5 with them. But what it meant is that there was a void space between the 4.4 and the 4.5. So it's like, oh, all the designers are there going, oh, what do we do with this? You know, how do we do this with them? But by saying that, let's just leave it as a void. It's a void space. The designer can creatively come up with something, or you can actually put your air conditioning units in there as well. So from a design perspective, that was a major breakthrough, that the designers were actually happy to accept a 4.5, you know, those ugly big gaping holes in there, could be designed in a nice way to allow a truck on site with them. So we knew the lot sizes, we knew what the heights could be, and these are some of the design bits that we came up with them. So you can see there where the void is between the 4.4 and the 4.5, and then they align at the ceiling of the first floor with them. So it works really well if you've got commercial on the ground floor and first floor and then residential, because you've got different floor ceiling heights for residential compared to commercial with them. But we're getting there. We're getting some design outcomes, and we're actually getting trucks on site, which would give us a safer servicing as well. So part of the study was that we looked at 4 different scenarios. We looked at mixed use, we looked at RFBs, we looked at corner blocks, we looked at mid blocks with them. So trying to work out the design solutions for all these different options with them, and to analyse the truck turning paths with them. So in this one here, and we chose blocks from around the city as well, so we could get a better feel of what it might actually look like too. So this was a mixed-use building, mid-site, commercial setting in the middle of Bankstown, and it's 1,896 metres squared, so it should be fine for fitting a HRV on site with them. So this is what it could potentially look like when you've got a mid-block, because otherwise if you've got a corner block, the preferred access will be from the secondary street. But with mid-block, it has to come in off the front of the road with it. So it was found that basement servicing, though, in a mid-block is really difficult because you need that an additional ramp and the additional 32 metres for it. So that left us with ground floor servicing with it. So again, when we applied that T-turning template to it, forward in, one reverse, forward out again, we were able to come up with a design that the truck could access with it, and the floors were aligned. Now the turning template looks like this when you look at it on a plan for it. But this was another huge step forward, that we now had these images that we could show our planners to go, it is possible, these are achievable with them as well. So with the project undertaken with Tallis and Benson and McCormack, we determined the comparative costs for vehicle sizes. We worked out the lot sizes for on-site vehicle access and the building service requirements. We resolved and gave direction to council for floor-to-ceiling heights for mixed use and RFBs. And we had better design ideas for on-site servicing. So we all went, phew, we got there. We actually got some resolution with it. But there's more. So now that the master plans have been adopted, we've now got to convert that to DCP requirements. And remember, we're still waiting for our LEP as well. So there's a bit of work to go. But initial discussions with our planning team have said, yep, we can use all those studies. We agree with all them. And so we've come up with a hierarchy of servicing. So we start with collect and return from a laneway as being our first preference. If there's a laneway, that's where we'll service it from. Then we'll move on to on-site collection as our second hierarchy of servicing, and then collect and return from the street. But the ones that collect and return from the street, that's if they don't have access to the laneway, they're not the right size, and they're not located on a state road with them. So there's a few parameters around that. So in theory, we've solved all our problems, except for those that are on main roads and aren't big enough to fit a HRV on site with them. So we looked at our area, and our spatial planning team took this to the next level with trying to work out, well, what does that mean and what does it look like with them? So they did a whole lot of mapping, and it's quite small there, but what you're looking for is the black squares around the lots with them. So we looked at who had the same lot owner with them. We consolidated them. We looked at the size of the lot. We looked at the frontage width. We looked at possible amalgamations, and we made the assumption that up to 4 lots could possibly be amalgamated. So it's a big assumption, but we had to start somewhere with it. We looked at the road types, so can we stop on the road or can we not stop on the road? And we looked at the collection types. Can we do collect and return, or do we do on site or from a side loader? So what this showed us was that 12% of the Bankstown, which is on this side, the right side for you, can't be serviced by a HRV. And 5% on Campsie can't be serviced by a HRV. So we've still got a long way to go to work out what we're going to do with them. But it showed us that we need a flexible fleet with them and how to look at the parameters for actually using an SRV with them. So our next step is to work out those parameters that if we do decide to go and purchase some SRVs, where would they be used and how would they be used? So we just need to put the parameters around before the developers get too excited about us potentially having SRVs. So from all of this, what we've learned is that we need better designers and architects. Sorry, Richard. Council needs a flexible fleet and collection services, but it also has to be economical and efficient, particularly for our demographics in our LGA as well, that just can't afford to keep increasing the fees for them. And relationships are important. Building and maintaining internal relationships with our planners and colleagues really helped elevate the importance of waste. We've got them sending us photos of bad bins lined up on the curb now. So you know you've got through to the planners when they're sending you bad photos with it. So it's great. So for us, the next steps, continual discussion with our planning team. We still need to work out the collect and return requirements. There's a whole lot of design issues around collect and return because we only cart 10 metres, which means you have to have your bin room or your temporary storage within 10 metres, and that's apparently really ugly again, having bins in the front. So there's a lot of work we need to do around with that, and achieving best practice through our master plan and consolidated DCP. So again, waiting for the LEP to be approved. We're going to do a fleet review to work out what do we actually need going forward and how many of each do we need going forward. So we've got a fleet of 50 at the moment, and pretty much all of them fall into the HRV category. So from the previous mapping, it's not going to work as the development increases across the city with it. As I mentioned, the collect and return, we need to look at that, and we're looking at making a permanent waste planning position to help with all of this within our team as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Narelle. That was fantastic, and you won't get any arguments from me on the importance of good design. Ultimately, good design saves money right through the building's life cycle, and so that saves money for council and for the people that are owning or living in those buildings. Our next speaker is Gabriella Love, who is the Senior Resource Recovery Officer at the City of Canterbury Council. Her paper, Pathway to Zero Waste, Taking Apartments on the Journey. Welcome, Gabriella.
Thank you, everyone, and good afternoon. So, I'm going to be talking about Pathway to Zero Waste, Taking Apartments on the Journey. Let's see if I've got this all good. Yep. So what I will do is give you a little introduction about City of Canterbury. Spoiler, we're not in Canada, we're in Sydney. Have a little chat about our resource recovery and waste strategy, our multi-unit dwelling strategy, and then I'm going to give sort of a brief overview of the programs that we have in apartment buildings at the moment, and then just a little bit on what's next for us. So about City of Canada Bay, we reside on Wongal land of the Eora Nation, and I just acknowledge that Aboriginal people were the first environmental stewards of City of Canada Bay and of this country. Sorry, there we go. We are located in Sydney's inner west, and we are just under 20 square kilometres, and we have 36 kilometres of shoreline along the Parramatta River, so the environment is very important to us and to our residents. We have about 90,000 residents, and 40% of these were born overseas. And we have about 36,000 households, and 61% of these are units. But prior to 2011, we had more standalone houses than we did units. So as you can see, our housing type is changing, and that's why this is a really important area for us. Our contamination ranges from 5 to 20%, and you can guess where the higher contamination rate lies. And last year we did an audit of all of our apartment buildings to have a look at the bins and the waste infrastructure, and confirmed that we have 1,145 apartment buildings, which is approximately 22,000 households. In 2021, we adopted our very first resource recovery and waste strategy, which was developed with extensive community consultation. We had over 550 responses to our survey, and we had 6 focus groups, and one of the topics was on high density living. We have some goals and targets under in our strategy, and because 61% of our households are apartment buildings, there's going to be a lot of work to meet those targets in that space. And we have 14 actions that are specific to apartment buildings within our strategy. And one of those actions is to maintain a clear understanding of challenges in multi-unit dwellings for correct waste management and improving behaviour. So to achieve that action as well as the other ones, we've developed an internal MUD strategy to kind of guide our work for short-term and long-term. So as sort of foreshadowed before, we've got a forecast for our population to grow by 35,000 by 2041, and this will be 11,000 additional dwellings, and our strategic planning team has said this will primarily be in MUDs. From our audit last year, we found that 82% of our buildings are not suitable for on-site collection, so that's a lot of waste presentation regarding bins and bulk that we need to deal with in our high-density areas. Spoiler, high contamination rate. The highest contamination rate is in high-rise apartment buildings. We have a transient population which can be difficult to engage with over the longer term. And then I think Rachel mentioned, a lot of the apartment buildings just have a waste chute, and so encouraging residents to take their recycling or their food recycling down to the basement can be a challenge, because really you'd just rather shove it in the one spot. So from our internal strategy, we have 9 key areas to address for apartment buildings. I won't go through them all now, but the programs that I'm going to touch on are related to this, and any gaps is obviously in our plan for the future. So our first program is our Strata and Building Managers Network, which we launched in 2021 during a COVID lockdown. So it was an online network which we have used on our community engagement platform Collaborate, where building managers, strata committee, really anyone who lives in an apartment building can log on and network with each other to support each other, share advice, share problems, that kind of thing. We have 37 managing agents signed up, and some of these manage multiple buildings. And as part of launching this network, we also launched a Strata bylaw template specific for waste management, which was developed for us by Strata lawyer Amanda Farmer, where strata committees can choose to adopt a waste management strata bylaw to help manage their internal waste. And so we had 55 attendees in person and 35 online. We had 12 strata committees have registered for this, but one of the challenges of this is actually getting them to adopt it in their strata plan. It's quite a process, lots of meetings, that kind of thing. So that's one of the challenges. And then for us, keeping up-to-date records of managing agents, strata managers, building managers, in ensuring that we know who our audience is. And I'll just say, I'm kind of giving you a brief overview and then talking about the challenges in hopes that it might assist you if you choose to do something like this. Another one of our programs is the Compost Capers program, which was a LGA-wide program, but of course not all apartment dwellers have gardens, so it's a bit difficult to compost. So we thought we would shift the program a little bit so that it was available for everyone. This also was launched during COVID, so we used our online Collaborate platform and did some composting videos, which you can see by the views there were very successful, with over 1,000 for the composting video, over 200 for the shared composting, and a whopping 12,000 views for the worm farming video. Since we have been able to become face-to-face again, we've had 3 engagement sessions, and overall we've had 7 buildings participate in shared composting, and then 65 residents have individual worm farms, and then 7 for individual compost bins, which could be apartment buildings that on the rare occasion do have a garden. After 6 months, we touch base with our residents to see how they're going, if they've actually established the worm farm or compost bin, and 73% have successfully established this. And so that's estimated over 11,000 kilos of food recovery, but that does include our single unit dwellings as well. Some of the challenges with this program specific to apartments is if you want to be in the shared composting program, you do need strata approval. And usually that's done by a champion, and so if the champion moves out, sometimes the compost bin can get a little bit sad and not continue. An operational challenge for council was compost bin storage and delivery. We don't have a lot of space to store these compost bins, and during the lockdown we did contactless delivery to them, so it's sort of a resource-intensive method. We did do some pickup sessions. We did one in April where I had to somehow get 100 worm farms to our event, which in itself was a challenge, but luckily we have good internal relationships that helped me do that. Yeah, I've already said that. So the next program is our apartment recycling program, which was one of my babies that we started out with. In 2020, we undertook a trial to test some behaviour change methods. I won't go through the different ones there, but they're up on the screen. We saw success in all of the education methods that we trialled, different success rates. We also had control buildings to ensure that we could measure any changes with those, and this was done by visual inspections, opening the recycling bin lid and actually counting the incorrect items. So our key learnings from all of them was that although they all did see a reduction, the biggest takeaway was really just being out and about and talking to residents, and they're being aware that council was coming to look at their bin. So because of the success of the trial, we've decided to roll it out as a whole of council program, and so this is available for all apartment buildings in the LGA, and it either happens by us engaging the building or they come and approach us and we go and do an inspection, because every apartment building is unique, as I like to say, and not every intervention will work in each apartment building. So we go have a chat to the building manager, see what might work, and then we establish those interventions, and then hopefully the outcome is less contamination and better waste management. So we've had over 90 buildings participate in the program, and based off the visual inspections, we get about a 40% reduction in the contamination items that we can see and count, which is really good. But the challenges and learnings, as I've said, it's resource intensive. The best results are when council is there visiting the building frequently and able to monitor and provide ongoing advice. The most successful intervention that we tested in the pilot was a feedback and prompt tool where we get residents to actually commit and pledge to their neighbours that they will unbag their plastic bags. Although it was the most successful, there's a lot of resistance to participate in this. I think because people, are a bit worried about what their neighbours might think of them, but we're trying to explain to them that that is the best way to get results. Space design and infrastructure can make it tricky for some of the signage. A lot of recycling bins are kept in the basement, so it's not people just using the chute aren't getting the education methods. Getting tenants to care when it appears that others is not. We get a lot of apathy in our buildings. What's the point? I can see all the contamination in the bin. It doesn't really matter what I do. And then our most common contamination item, soft plastics, we were getting a lot of good results with that, and the messaging about take your soft plastics to the supermarket has obviously changed because Recycle's no longer functioning, but we are just about to trial a new service called HomeCycle, where residents can get their soft plastics, textiles, e-waste picked up directly from their doorstep, and we're going to trial this in apartment buildings, having like one central collection space for these items. The roads to FOGO. So this is the big one that we're trialling in our highest density suburb roads. We received a grant from the New South Wales government, and a one-year trial commenced in October 2022. So we're at the 6-month mark. We decided we would go all in and try the hardest area with our trial and see how we go. We have 750 participant households, which is about 19 participant apartment complexes, which comprises of 62 addresses. So we've provided all households with the caddy liners up front, but only 85% of them are going to receive or are able to receive these on a quarterly basis. And this is to test if people will still use the service if liners aren't supplied by council. And the aim of this, as I said, let's see what high density FOGO take-up looks like, what the bin configuration can be, the starter pack materials, and what education interventions will work. We actually just had our 6-month audit on Friday. I was hoping I might have some sneaky results for you, but I don't. But we've had we do visual audits every quarter, and what we've found is the results are there, but on average 44% of the bin is full. What's interesting, the bins that only have garden organics or only have food organics, there's a lot more garden organics than we expected in MUDs. And the food-only bins are only averaging about 20% full. And so we're projecting that because it is an apartment trial, that we're not going to have the capture rate that the EPA forecasts. We'll probably have a lower rate than the 28%, I think it is. And so on our evaluation, this will help us decide if FOGO is the best way to go for apartment buildings or if food-only might be a better configuration. Our engagement, we've had 18 information sessions where we actually go into the buildings and engage with the residents. This is over 281 residents engaged. The most common question is, where do I get more liners? But as I mentioned before, only 85% of our residents are eligible to receive the quarterly liner delivery, and for them to get those liners, they have to fill out a survey requesting them, and so we can check in to see how the service is going. And so from last quarter, we had 12% of eligible residents sign up for liners, so that's a good indication of the participation rate, because you assume if they're asking for liners, they're using the service. We also participated in SSROC's stakeholder perspectives for food and garden organic services. And so they've kindly let me share some of the results from this. As you can see there, this is about the challenges, and the biggest one being compliance and using the bins correctly. And this really highlights the importance of the strata committee members being on board in having the FOGO success, and that's something that we've found as well in the first 6 months. And then the other interesting insight from this was about building upgrades and enhancements, and this was from the stakeholders' perspectives themselves, so building managers, strata committee members, residents, and it's about who's responsible for the upgrades. And the biggest one was signage, which they saw as council's responsibility, and that's often what we do. But then some of the others were around hygiene and WHS and staff, and it's about a mixed responsibility for who's responsible for these, and we found that they themselves were automatically taking ownership of this, so that's pretty significant. Our last program is a building manager toolkit. So in 2021, Council trialled 2 additional bulk household collections in our high density suburb roads again. So our current bulk household frequency is we only have 2 scheduled collections per year for all households. So that means twice a year in roads, there's lots of bulk household to be collected in our highest density suburb. So we tried 2 additional collections for those, and we found that this wasn't efficient to continue within our current contract. So we're looking at other ways to reduce the amount of bulk household. And so to do this, we've created a toolkit for building managers to try and divert some of that material, whether that be by having like a sharing space within the building or having alternate stream options, things like that. And at the same time measuring our building managers' willingness to actually implement these in the building. And within that, we'll be testing the home recycling pickup service that I mentioned earlier to try and separate some of these streams. And we have an engagement session for that planned in June. When I was watching everyone else's slides, I was like, I really should have had a key take-home slide. But anyway, what's next for us is regional audits have just happened, so we'll get a better idea of what's in our bins. The building manager engagement session I've just mentioned. We're currently developing a waste management plan checklist for developers as well as staff who do building referrals, so that hopefully we can get as good outcomes as some of the ones Narelle mentioned. Investigating additional waste streams, such as e-waste and textiles. The future bulk household collection scheduling frequency, as I mentioned. A Clean Streets campaign around our high density areas, because this includes private land and council land. And then a DCP review for future services like food recycling. And that's me telling myself to hurry up. So the key take-homes, since I don't have a slide, is that every apartment building is unique, and I think you really have to take them on the journey with all your programs. Living in a single unit dwelling, you have a lot more responsibility over your bins. So it's really, I think, being there and showing that you care. It's really useful, and building managers often say that to us. Like, it's really great to see that council is here, like, on the journey with us. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriella. Wonderful. Our next speaker is Eugenie Alonzo, Chief Marketing Officer from RecycleSmart. Her paper's entitled A Case Study, How Muds Became Good Recyclers. Welcome, Eugenie.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining today. So as we say, I'm going to try and show you a few uplifting examples on how muds can actually become good recyclers. So I will start just with a few words about RecycleSmart to explain to you what we do. So we partner with councils and with recyclers to make our service available to residents. And our service is the power pickup, and it enables a collection of tricky-to-recycle items from people's doorsteps to make sure it's recycled. So we collect soft plastics, clothes, e-waste, batteries, and lots of other things, and I'll come to that a bit later. So a little while ago, we conducted a trial in a few apartment buildings because we were seeing that they were needing something very specific, tailored to their need. And that's the results of those trials that I want to share with you today and present to you the building program that we have designed. So I think we kind of get the problem here in this room. Muds and good recycling habits are not really a match made in heaven, and there are like multiple reasons for that. So and I'll come to that in a moment. Yeah, so it's not a match made in heaven, and they're not going to go away anytime soon. I think we've seen that in the previous presentations. Every single council see a rise in the number of MUDs in their own LGA, and that's, for example, a good number to remember. Over the past 25 years, the increase in the number of MUDs has been of 78%, and with the current pressure on the housing market, it's not going to go anywhere. And obviously, that presents a unique set of challenges that we need to address from a waste management perspective. So why are MUDs such bad recyclers? There's a number of factors, obviously, that we have identified. So a number of barriers. The first one is a physical barriers that has been mentioned a few times already. There's a physical distance between the people and the bins. There are the chutes, obviously, and so it might be hard to get them to do the right thing. There are also social barriers. There's a lack of accountability and transparency. So the residents don't feel like they have to do the right thing because they see that lots of other people don't do it. And then the third one, which has been really brilliantly exposed as well before, is the outdated infrastructure. That is also a hard problem to address. So for example, a recent study conducted in ACT showed that there was really diverse range of contamination rate in MUDs. It could range from anywhere between 18% up to 84%, and which shows that there's really a need for a tailored solution for those buildings. So that's why we came up with the idea of the building program that I'm going to show to you in a second. And how we set up that program, we defined 4 key strategies to address all of those problems. So the first one is a consistent blueprint, trying to just have one solution, very simple, that could fit all the building managers whilst still having a tailored approach, which is that kind of like the third point you see here. Proposing a tailored services to building manager is key because, as we've touched on before, they're all very different. Not all the rooms are set up the same way. The residents can be very different from a MUD to another, and it's important to recognize that. The second key strategy here is the educational tools. So obviously, education is key when it's coming to recycling, repeating the messaging, making sure that the signages are everywhere, and that you can touch the residents multiple times in their journey, and not only in the bin room. And then the fourth one, because I've already said the third one, is data and reporting. We're strong believers in data. We measure everything that we collect, and then we feed that data back because it shows progress and impact, and we believe it's important to keep everyone engaged. So now I'm going to show you a little video that explains how the programs works, and that video is shared with building managers. Hoping to trigger that. All right, so what do we collect exactly? Oh, wait. So as I touched on before, so we collect soft plastics, no need to explain to you what it is, clothes, e-waste, and what we call misfits, which is a long, very long list of lots of things, like your polystyrene, batteries, light bulbs, aluminium coffee capsules, and lots of other things. So with this program, what we have tried to do is to maximize the engagement of the building manager. We are really trying to leverage the building manager as our champion for the program, feeling that if he was engaged, or she was engaged actually, that will really help us to reach out the residents. They know their residents, and we were wanting them to feel comfortable with the program. So that's why we created different types of Recycle Heroes, so they could choose which level they wanted to start on and how they wanted to evolve with us. That really provided us with a great output, because it just ensured that they were feeling comfortable, they were feeling that there was a quick solution to implement, and that they could always improve on later if they wanted to. So how it works for Building Manager, our mantra at RecycleSmart is simple. So we just really kept it super simple for them. So one, they had to set up the room, and I'll come to that a bit more detailed in a moment. Two, spread the word to their residents. Obviously, that is key. And three, they simply have to book a pickup. It takes less than 2 minutes, and they can do that on their phone, through our app, or on the website, at the desktop, like they want. So the recycling room. As we were saying before, MUDs are very diverse, and some of them have big rooms, some of them are really tiny rooms, and you can see there a couple of examples of rooms that have been set up. So it can be as small as just a few shelves with buckets for us to collect from them, or bigger rooms with bins dedicated to all the streams that we collect. When it comes to setting up the room, we are also here to help every step of the way, so our ops team can go and give a visit and give them advice on how to best set up the room, which means that the building manager feels like he's he's surrounded with help and not just left by himself, which was important too. The second step for the building managers is the ready-to-go communication pack that they can download directly from our website, depending on the level of, on the number of items they want us to collect. They can download all the communications. So we've been very open, and we are proposing to them lots of resources. We have provided them with snippets for their newsletter, short catchy sentences that they can directly share on their WhatsApp group with their residents if they have one. They have flyers they can print out, posters, signage for the bins, posters for the notice boards, everything is in there, just downloadable in one click. The tone is obviously very engaging, fresh. You can see here that we love pink, not just me. And yeah, we're just trying to make recycling a bit fun and attractive. And the other important thing on that is the QR code that you can see there that enables residents to just access our website or our social media page, sign up to our newsletter, because all that digital part is very important in our education toolkit, because it just makes sure that we reach out the residents at different moments of their lives as well, with different types of information. And then the third point is that we provide unlimited pickups for the building managers and also obviously the data. So from a pickup perspective, the building manager pays $50 a month, and that gives them access to unlimited pickups. And they can book for the next day. There's no required extensive planning to do. It's available the next day. They can book for as many or as little as they want. Then that helps them keep the room super tidy. And then they also have access to the data. Actually, the data is fed back to both the councils and the building manager. If you can see here at the very bottom, we're showing the split in terms of what we collect in terms of categories. And the orange bar, which is 44%, shows that the biggest categories of what we collect in terms of volume is our misfit category. And the biggest item that we collect the most is polystyrene from building managers, buildings. So now I'm going to present to you with the case study. It's a 262-unit building that's based in Sydney that has been working with us for over a year and a half now. And we'll present to you the results of the first 12 months. So the 5 types of resources that we collected are soft plastics, polystyrene, batteries, aluminium coffee capsules, and cartridges. And we have, as I was saying, we're going to present the results for 12 months with them. Here is the picture of the setup they have in their bin room. And there are a few really interesting things to note about it. First of all, the signage. So it's our signage that we provided, but very interesting to see that it's been translated in Chinese to fit the demographic of that building and to really make it work for that demographic. And then my favorite part of that setup is the piece of cardboard that you can maybe see on top of the shelf. Well, the building manager has just pinned different types of soft plastics and different types of things that he was finding in the bin, and that is not soft plastics, just to really add an extra layer of education, more tangible, directly on the spot. Results? So we have found that we have helped them to reduce the number of red bin collected weekly by 5, just by us coming and picking up lots of other streams. The other feedback that we got from the building manager is that she was seeing more usage of the recycling bin, just because it really made people more aware of recycling, and she was noticing that people were using that recycling bin more. And then because that building was really close to jump to the next tier in terms of landfill bins provided and that they had to pay it for through the councils, by using our service, they actually saved $74,000 in council waste collection fees. In terms of challenges, what the building manager has shared with us is it comes to contamination again, obviously, and it just shows the importance of always repeating when it comes to education. So she was finding that sometimes it was still a bit hard to keep the soft plastics out of the yellow bin. That was hard for people to understand the difference between soft foam and soft plastics, which is not really surprising, it is hard. And then keeping hard foam from the polystyrene recycling. In terms of impact, so we have diverted with that building over 60,000 litres of resources from landfill, and that has a tangible impact from a climate perspective. We've saved 11,000 litres of water and almost 900 kilos of CO2 emissions, which is obviously the end goal. And that building program is currently rolling out in 13 councils, which we're very, very excited about. So to wrap up, just sharing here the learnings. So we believed it works for a number of reasons I'm going to share now. The first one, and again, that I think after simple, it is our mantra, it's conveniency. We live in an era of convenience. Everything is so easy, except recycling, well, and lots of other things. But I think recycling is really not easy at all, and that's a real problem. So with that program, we're making it super, super convenient for the building manager, because they have this next day pickup available. They can simply book online. They don't have to call us, send us an email or whatever. They still can if they want, but they just really can book in 2 clicks. And then they have this communication toolkit, so they don't even have to think about anything. It's all ready to go for them. And we're always available to make any adjustment they might need. For the residents, easy as well. It's all in the one location. It's all super broken down for them to understand. And they can learn as they go, and they can follow us on social media for more fun tips and tricks. That's one, the conveniency. Number 2 is it's super quick to implement. We can help with the setup of the room, but it literally is up and running in 3 clicks and a half. And the quicker the setup is, the most efficient we find it is, because once the BD manager starts asking questions, if you can reply straight away and keep him engaged and have the program set up straight away, you just maintain that momentum and keep them excited. It's also solution-oriented. So it's more than just an education tool. We're offering the solution to both the building manager and the residents in the room. So we're just limiting recycling, really. So if you're down in your bin room and you have your soft plastics and you're like, oh, it doesn't go in that recycling bin, I should take it somewhere else. But oh, no, wait, the bin is just there. It's just really easy and there's no excuse. And it's also disruptive. Pink again, we believe that recycling can be fun. So with that disruptive communication, we're just really engaging more with residents, and it's data focused. And again, we are a strong believer in showing progress and impact. And that's all for me.
Thank you very much, Eugenie. That was great. Now, our last speaker, we're running right on time, so I hope everyone's saving up those questions, is Anna Ricketts. Anna is the Regional Manager, New South Wales, Envirocom Australia, and her paper is entitled "Who Said Composting in Muds Was Not Possible?" Welcome, Anna.
Good afternoon, everyone. Stick with me, you get to eat again soon, okay? It's all right. Welcome to Coffs Harbour. This is Gumbaynggirr country, the place of plenty, and also the place I feel privileged enough to call home. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Gumbaynggirr Nation, and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. I'd also like to pay my respects to the Gumbaynggirr elders past, present and emerging. Okay, that's not a typo. Composting in muds is actually possible, and I'm hoping that this presentation will show you how. So in March 2020, the New South Wales EPA released a curbside red lid bin audit data report. Unsurprisingly, food waste accounted for a significant proportion of the household general waste bin contents. As a proportion of all waste materials disposed, food and garden organics comprised 54% of the general waste stream in councils with no curbside organic service, 41% of the general waste stream in councils with a garden organics or GO service, and 24% of the general waste stream in councils with a FOGO, food organics, garden organics service. As you'd all be aware, the New South Wales Waste and Sustainable Materials Strategy released by the government in 2021 set ambitious targets as it aims to transition to a circular economy over the next 20 years. This includes the mandating of the separate collection of food and garden organics from all New South Wales households by 2030, which will help to achieve the targets of halving food waste to landfill and achieving net zero emissions from organics in landfill by 2030. As a result, there has been a flurry of activity in the FOGO space in both metropolitan and regional New South Wales. Assisted by the New South Wales EPA Go FOGO grants, New South Wales councils can now seek support to deliver new weekly food-only FO or FOGO services to their communities. These may be households that currently have no curbside organic bin service or households with only a garden waste collection. As of January 2053, as the map shows, 56 councils in New South Wales have or are about to roll out a FOGO collection service. Now, while introducing a FOGO service in SUDS is relatively simple, or should be, the introduction of a FOGO service for MUDs has many more challenges. As many of us would know, waste management in MUDs presents its own unique sets of challenges, whether this be infrastructure and servicing challenges, inadequate or poorly used bin storage rooms or corrals, addressing recycling contamination issues, dealing with transient populations, illegal dumping incidences, or coming up with strategies to manage blocked garbage chutes, MUDs are undoubtedly a challenge. Throwing FOGO into the mix can often exacerbate these issues, and while many councils are currently grappling with the idea of introducing a FOGO service in MUDs, others are also exploring some other options when it comes to addressing food waste and sustainable diversion of food in MUDs. This is obviously why they transitioned to FOGO. The two such councils are Burwood Council, located in the inner west of Sydney with a population of just over 40,000 people, and Ku-ring-gai Council, located in northern Sydney with a population of around 124,000 people. Now, according to both the council's community strategic plans, in Burwood, 60% of residents live in MUDs, while in Ku-ring-gai, more than a quarter of dwellings are classed as high-rise or medium-density dwellings. In both instances, the waste generated by this household type represents a significant proportion of all residential waste generated. For a majority of MUDs residents without access to a curbside FOGO service, the default disposal mechanism for food waste is into the general waste stream. While composting in MUDs might not be common practice, introducing an on-site composting system not only provides MUDs residents with an opportunity to divert food and organic waste from landfill, but also provides access to a communal shared resource, helping to improve networking opportunities and start conversations. In partnership with Envirocom, Burwood Council implemented a composting pilot project in MUDs in 2021, and in 2022, Ku-ring-gai Council launched their compost cooperative project. So let's first talk about Burwood Council's composting pilot project and the approach taken. So to help promote the programme, an online expression of interest was posted on the homepage of the council website and further promoted via council's social media platforms in November 2020. The EOI form required residents to provide contact details for their building managers to confirm that they had the support and to ensure that the building selected for inclusion in the project would have the best possible chance of committing to and following through with the programme. 3 MUDs were selected to participate in the pilot project with the provision of a shared composting system. Pre-implementation of the composting system included emails that were circulated directly to residents via the strata or building managers. Flyers were also letterbox dropped and posters were signposted to entry doors, entry foyers and lifts to announce the building's participation. The other collateral was the shared compost bin is coming soon collateral, and these were distributed in February 2021. Following the scheduling of the compost installation and education workshops, the second round of collateral was released promoting this information electronically via email and through signposting approximately a week ahead of the workshop. This is via letterbox drop, several days out from each workshop as a final reminder. The implementation phase involved a composting on-site workshop. At each participating MUD, a 600-litre maize compost bin was installed, along with the educational signage. A compost turner was also supplied to assist with aerating the compost pile, and each participant was provided with a benchtop kitchen caddy as a further incentive to store and divert food waste. These face-to-face workshops actively engage residents in the process of installing and establishing their composting systems. During the workshop, residents were also provided information about material acceptability, how to maintain and care for their composting systems, and also troubleshooting tips and tricks. The Mayor of Burwood, Councillor John Faker, was super involved in this process and attended one of the workshops for the development of a promotional clip available on YouTube and also Council's website.
G'day Burwood, I'm very excited today to be introducing compost bins in apartment buildings. Now this has got many great benefits. One of those is that we're bringing communities closer together that live in these apartments. Now Rachel, what are some of the other great environmental benefits of having a compost bin in your apartment block?
Well, John, our studies show that about a third of the waste that's in our general waste bins is actually food scraps that we could have put in compost systems, worm farms and things like that. And while we're pleased to hear that more and more Burwood residents are getting involved with composting in their households, residents who live in apartments just often don't have the space to do that sort of a thing. So by having a shared compost system, we're providing those residents the opportunity to put their food scraps into a compost so that it doesn't end up in landfill.
So if we get more food waste in these compost bins and out of your garbage bin, it's going to reduce landfill. So it's really important, jump onto our website, get some more information, meet your neighbours, get together and come and help us create more compost bins in our apartment buildings here in our town centre.
Okay, so data collection, as we've heard in the previous presentations, is essential, as is education. So the educational signage was installed within the direct vicinity of the compost systems and was designed with clear images as well as instructions about how to care for the compost. The signage acted as an ongoing point of source prompt for those residents that had attended the workshop, but was also designed as instructions for new residents who might engage with that system post-workshop. In addition to the signage installed at the side of each compost bin, the same signage was also displayed in the mud bin rooms to encourage residents to divert their food from the general waste stream and into the on-site composting system. To enable the collection of data related to the use and uptake of the on-site composting systems, a laminated poster was also attached to each compost bin with a QR code. During each interaction with the composting system, participating residents were encouraged to scan the QR code and complete a short online survey to enter data about how frequently they use the compost system and record the volumes of waste being diverted from landfill based on how full their caddy was. This feedback mechanism also provided an opportunity for residents to provide us with questions and to seek clarification regarding their on-site composting system. We didn't just give up on them then either. We also had a post-implementation phase. So following the workshop, an education flyer displaying the same style artwork as the compost bin signage was distributed via letterbox drop to all MUDs to encourage new residents to participate in the programme. An infographic was designed to inform building residents of the availability of the shared compost with details of how to obtain a free kitchen caddy. In addition, educational updates were also provided to current participating residents via email, and these were based on the questions posted in the feedback survey. So the results, the data was reported 77 times between February and June 2021. 65% of residents accessed the compost bin when their caddy was more than 3/4 full, and only 10% indicated that they were unsure of material acceptability, suggesting that the education had been successful. It is estimated that at least 156 kilos of food had been diverted from landfill from these reported events. However, the actual diversion of food from landfill is anticipated to be much higher as a result of people not reporting their interactions. So let's move on now to Ku-ring-gai's approach to their compost cooperative project. This is for residents of Ku-ring-gai living in units and apartment blocks who want to compost food scraps. The Compost Cooperative project is free to join. Applications are open to unit owners, strata managers, building managers, or members of the executive committees. The Compost Cooperative only requires one unit to be responsible for the composting system and is eligible for all members of the units. Applications are made via an online form that provide council with information about the building and who will be participating in the programme. Once applications are received, instructions are then provided on how to select the most appropriate composting or worm farming system to meet the needs. Once approved, applicants are then required to attend an online workshop on composting with instructions on how to set up the selected system. During the startup in 2022, this was delivered as an online webinar by one of Envirocom's facilitators. After completing the online workshop, applicants are then provided with a unique code to order their chosen system through the Compost Revolution. A rebate of up to $350 is provided by council. So during the launch of the Compost Cooperative project in June 2022, Envirocom facilitated compost workshops at 3 MUDs in the Ku-ring-gai LGA. A caddy was once again provided to all participants, inclusive of a QR code, in order to record use of the system and amount of food diverted. This was followed by weekly email support for a month post-workshop implementation. The project's current model is very similar in that once the composting system is delivered and set up, participants are asked to record the amount of food scraps collected in the first month by scanning a QR code provided by council, with support and assistance available from council as needed. After 3 months of using the compost or worm farm system, participants are then required to complete a second online survey on their experiences. So the Ku-ring-gai results, data was reported 365 times over 6 weeks. 53% of residents accessed the composting system when their caddy was full, and a further 34% when the caddy was between half and 3/4 full. It is estimated between 300 to 700 kilos of food was diverted in this time, but again, actual figures are likely to be much higher. Less than 10% of residents indicated that they were unsure about material acceptability, once again suggesting that the educational material was affected. So some of the key learnings out of both these projects. As we'd all know, to address a potential barrier to participation related to point-of-source food waste capture and storage, participating MUD residents in both councils and LGAs were provided with a benchtop kitchen caddy, making the collection and transportation of food scraps between the kitchen and the compost bins easier and more convenient. In a follow-up survey of Ku-ring-gai MUD's residents, 100% of participants found the caddy either useful or very useful, and as feedback from one resident indicated, the kitchen caddies are great and don't smell if the lid is closed. Note to self. Another key learning was around site visit and scoping, so advice on appropriate site location is considered critical to the success of the selected composting or worm farming system and should be factored into the application and follow-up process. Ahead of the Burwood compost workshops, an initial site visit was actually undertaken at each of the buildings in order to determine the most appropriate position for the shared composting system, with consideration given to ease of access for residents, access to sunlight, nearby units that might oppose a location. Feedback from a resident suggested that the site of the shared compost worked out to be a great spot. Initial concerns of contamination from passers-by due to its location at the front of the building has not been an issue. Considering the language needs of residents and making sure signage and supporting collateral is accessible to your target audience is really essential, as RecycleSmart just noted then. For example, the Kringai signage was provided in Korean and Chinese in addition to English. As feedback from a very honest resident with English as a second language indicated, the educational signage was really effective when I got a copy in the right language. And interestingly, browns was a big learning curve for us as well. So the potentially limited supply of garden-produced browns, carbon-rich materials that are dry in nature, such as dry leaves, dry grass and twigs, has the potential to cause issues at some mud complexes if this is not supplemented by other browns, such as paper, ripped-up paper and cardboard. Providing information to residents about brown material options in the application process may be useful to ensure the finished end quality of the compost. Feedback from residents identified that there's not a lot of leaf litter and other browns for the compost. The contact intends to advise others to dump old potting mix and cardboard into the compost to supplement this, and that most city units are on concrete blocks, and so incorporating brown material is likely to be an issue for many. And while we all know that data reporting is essential, it's also likely to be a bit hit and miss in this instance when relying on participants to enter the data. While use of a QR code is a great approach, if this is located on signage at the compost location and it relies on people taking their phone with them to scan the code and enter the survey data. Anecdotal feedback also indicated that the QR code did not work well at night. Attaching a QR code to the caddy was far more successful during the Kringai Compost Cooperative launch and made data entry easier and more convenient, which is maybe why we got a better uptake of people reporting their usage. Regardless, total data reported in this presentation is not necessarily reflective of total rates of participation, as indicated by the following resident feedback. Not everyone reports data, as many forget to take the phone down or empty the caddy at night, and the QR code does not scan well at night. All units use the shared compost, but most forget to take their phones with them when emptying their caddies, so do not report the data. And finally, while food waste diversion from landfill is obviously a critical objective of the composting scheme, a communal composting system in MUDs can also act as a shared community space that improves communications between residents and becomes an inclusive and shared networking collaboration space that breaks down barriers and starts conversations. Without private gardens, composting in MUDs also provides an opportunity for residents to get their hands dirty and connect with nature. This is well summarised by the following feedback from one of the MUDs residents. Our group has set up a chat group in WhatsApp to collaborate on eco-processes and provide each other with support and stuff that is happening in our community. In order to change how people become eco-friendly depends much upon the way communication is used. It's not so much about the process of education, but more about how you create inclusion and develop the focus away from poor outcomes. I found the composting program useful. It is a tool to building better environmental outcomes and may reduce some waste from landfill. It should be noted that Burwood are currently trialling a FOGO curbside service, but I'd also like to note that this composting can complement a FOGO service. It does not have to be one or the other. If you'd like more information on any of these programs, I'd invite you to reach out to myself or also to contact the councils directly with the details on the screen. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Anna. We are right on time, so we've got 10 minutes between us and afternoon tea, so I might just ask the other four speakers to pop back up to the stage, and we will take a few questions. If anyone would like to ask a question in the room, just raise your hand and just wait for a microphone.
Thanks very much. Got a two-parter actually for Rachel. Given you were mentioning about the technology changing, does council have any interest or commitment to investigating further technologies? And part two, given the extra costs potentially to the householders for clean-up in particular and potentially energy, is there any opportunity for council to reimburse or to discount those costs by using the end material to in their parks and gardens?
Thank you. Two very good questions. So the first one's on technology. So I would absolutely love if there was a one-size-fits-all model. There isn't, and I'm also cognizant that we can't have 1,000 different types of technologies to solve our FOGO issues. So I foresee there being a mix of technologies in the future, not necessarily on-site within the bin room. We're also exploring communal drop-off FOGO centres, so similar to the South Korean model where they use dehydrators but in public spaces. Second part, in terms of cost, that is definitely something that we're exploring. City of Melbourne has a waste charge, which is based on, I guess, the value of the household. So it's, I guess, a shared cost. It is more expensive than the traditional bin-based model. However, I guess you do pay for quality, and we achieve that through lower contamination, better participation rates, and getting that real interactive data from our residents as well. So, yeah, we are looking at ways to lower the cost of these different types of technologies and make them compete more heavily with the bin-based system so it's equitable across all the dwellings.
Excellent. Another question?
Hi, I had a question for Eugenie. I just wanted to know, you're collecting a lot of, the hard to recycle stuff like polystyrene, and I can imagine all the different bits and pieces. And I just wondered what their destiny was, what your connection is with the actual processing of those materials.
Thank you. That's a really good question. So we do have partnerships in place with recyclers. And that's the case definitely for polystyrene. So whether, depending on the agreement we have with the recycler, whether we can drop off those items directly to locations that facilitate for us, or alternatively, when it's not the case, we have our own consolidation point. So then we can bring different resources from different residents or buildings. And then once this consolidation point is full, we just transfer the resources to the recycler in one go.
Excellent. Any other questions from the floor? Yes.
Again, for Eugenie, just curious, with those unique recycling streams, have you guys got enough data on board to maybe develop a waste generation rate per, say, apartment or person, potentially, number of people that are coming out of those buildings? Because I could see value to that, being available publicly to a degree.
In terms of number of residents participating into the program, you mean?
More as in a waste generation output. So it's based on number of apartments in a particular building, the output of polystyrene is X litres per week or month, or have you been able to get any outcomes like that so far?
No, not yet, but we definitely have the raw data, so that's something that we can definitely look into. At the moment, we've been also improving our data collection system, so we are more granular in that misfits category to make sure that we really get more insightful data around what exactly people are giving us, and then from there we will totally be able to get that data done. Really good point, though. We all love data.
Any more questions? Yes.
Yeah, I had a question for Anna just about the backyard composting, because I do that where I live, but about, potential contamination in in backyard recycling for muds from if people are needing to put in stuff for extra carbon, and they might, you know, we've just been hearing about people, the compostable but not compostable food containers and things like that. So I just wanted to ask what's happening in that space and what do you know?
Thanks for the question. So we don't have actually any data on the contamination rates, but we are very prescriptive about what browns are accepted. I think the other benefit of this system too is an opt-in. And so the people that are engaging with those systems are those who really want to participate. And so it's a very engaged, very motivated community. And for those people who are new to it, there's also a lot of champions within those buildings that we were finding who are very proud and very supportive of their system and would provide a lot of education to others that came in. So while I don't have any specific data, we were quite prescriptive around acceptability. And yeah, I think there was a great engagement with the system as well.
Yeah, hi. My name's Liam. I'm the Deputy Lord Mayor of Perth. Question for Rachel. Really interesting presentation. When you were getting things off the ground and you were doing the EOI process, did you find that there were a lot of apartment buildings wanting to take place, or it was a very niche? And have you now got a lot more people on that list?
Yeah, so our current list has about 200 buildings with an active EOI. We are looking at expanding the program to mixed-use buildings just to see if we can mix in the commercial waste with the residential waste as well. So yeah, we do have a lot of interest, and since the ABC News bit in February, it sort of exploded, and we're getting interest from councils all across Australia, and I'm kind of just pointing them to their local council. I'd like to solve everyone's issues, but I can't. Yeah, so there's a huge appetite for something like this, and particularly in those buildings that have on-site gardens, because then that's the whole circular story in which they can then consume their own stuff. City of Melbourne's looking to buy back the material as well. So yeah, that's a really good circular story, and what we're putting in is what we're taking back. So yeah, with the EOI, I think you wouldn't be pressed to get a lot of interest. In fact, we almost have too much interest, and I don't want to disappoint buildings.
Sure, and just sorry, 2 follow-ups as well. When you were talking about that range of I think the 35 to about 180, I think you mentioned, what are you finding is the sweet spot in what people are willing to pay?
It's interesting because we're paying that at the moment, so we'd have to really compare what our waste service for FOGO is at a single unit dwelling level. It can be cost competitive, particularly if we're able to halve it through longer term lease agreements, lowering that discharge cost. So I think it can be quite cost competitive, but I'd have to run the numbers. It is really a bit of a balancing act, so you can look at it per tonne diverted, which will compete directly with the gate fee that you're paying for your normal standard bin service, or a per dwelling charge, even though we acknowledge that not all dwellings will be participating. So yeah, it's something we're exploring because we do want to make sure it's equitable, but you do have to pay a bit more for something as shiny as this.
Excellent. I've actually got a question for Narelle. It's great to see such clear, unambiguous guidance for developers in terms of how you want good outcomes for the access to sites. The 2-part question, firstly, is have you got to the stage of getting some feedback from developers on that design guidance? And secondly, when it finds its way into planning policy, is the intent that it will be a mandatory requirement, or will it just fall into that advisory guidance that most planning policy is?
For the first one, because we don't have our consolidated LEP and DCP, because we don't have our consolidated DCP in practice yet, we push it as far as we can. So any DA that we come in, we use what we're calling best practice, which is what's going to be in our consolidated DCP. So while we've got the Bankstown and we've got the Canterbury DCP, any new application that comes in, we will try and get them to develop it to the best practice using the services and the criteria that we've put into it. Now we push that as far as we can. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. At the moment, even our generation rates are different between the two sides as well. So we push it as far as we can. Sometimes we end up in court and I can win that way, and sometimes I don't. So it's sometimes you win. As for the longer term one, because we are putting it into the DCP as much as we can, and then it will be in the waste guidelines, we're hoping it will be more effective than just putting it into planning policy.
Excellent. And one last question before it's time for afternoon tea to share them around. I think this one's for Gabriella, but it has to do with all of anyone who's mentioned the caddies. I remember getting my first countertop caddy from the City of Port Adelaide Enfield back in about 2004 or 2005. And since then, they've tried about 6 or 7 different ways of getting liners to people, none of which seem to be perfect. And it's an ongoing problem that as soon as you don't have the liners, it's introducing friction into the system of using the green organics when you've got this frictionless red top bin that you can just whack it in anyway. Through the processes you've been through, have you had any feedback on that issue of how people want to receive the liners and what's easiest for them?
Not specifically. I guess we're only 6 months in and we're advising those eligible that we do a quarterly delivery, which we send it to their letterbox, but they have to sign up to receive it. Most of the feedback we get is that the liners are too thin, that when they're carrying it down to the bin that they're breaking, which we advise, well, make sure you take your caddy with you. Because they are compostable. When you get the liquid in, the idea is that they break down. Surprisingly, we haven't had any requests from the 15% who we aren't supplying the liners with. So yeah, it's kind of a wait and see for us.
Excellent. Unless anyone has any really pressing questions? No? Would everyone show their appreciation? Rachael, Narelle, Gabriella, Eugenie and Anna, thank you very much.